On the debate tonight, you might soon have to link your Aadhaar card with your voter ID. The Election Commission is mulling making the Aadhaar voter ID linkage mandatory.
Now, whether or not this will come within the parameters of the Supreme Court judgment is something we will be tracking very closely. But clearly, given the fact that this is a move, if implemented, could raise quite a few eyebrows.
Citizens are divided about linking their Aadhaar with their right to vote.
वोटर आईडी के साथ में इसके साथ में यूज़ नहीं करना चाहिए, क्योंकि वोटर आईडी जो अपना जो इसका जो आधार कार्ड का है उसका बहुत मिसयूज़ हो रहा है।
आधार को लिंक तो नहीं करना चाहिए क्योंकि प्राइवेसी उसमें रहते नहीं है।
In a way it's good because obviously you are getting all the relevant information and genuine information of a person.
So if it is linked, I don't have any problem.
Linking your voter ID to Aadhaar will indirectly create a mess. So it should not be created as of now.
Mirror now asks, will linking Aadhaar with voter IDs clean up the electoral process? Should India link their Aadhaar card to their voter ID card? Let's debate.
You're watching the Urban Debate in Mirror now. Faye D'Souza, thank you for joining us. After a very long time, we come back to the Aadhaar conversation. In fact, it was in September when we last had this conversation before the Supreme Court gave us its verdict. Remember, the Supreme Court did tell us quite clearly that Aadhaar should be used for certain measures, but not others, and it cannot be made mandatory. But here's a new conversation to have. According to our colleagues at the Economic Times, the Election Commission is considering linking Aadhaar to voter IDs. Now, there are two sides to this argument. On one hand, it could mean we would clean up the electoral roll and actually make sure genuine voters are voting. On the other hand, that would make Aadhaar compulsory. So here's the question, should it be done? What is your opinion? What would you like to say? Our phone lines are open. Joining me on the show, Mohammad Khan, spokesperson of the Congress, Shailesh Gandhi, former Chief Information Commissioner, Anubhuti Vishnoi is the senior assistant editor at the Economic Times who wrote the story. Kailash Vasudev, senior advocate for the Supreme Court, joins us as well. So does Bhaskar Ghosh, spokesperson of the BJP. And we'll also have an independent researcher join us in a bit. Srinivas Kodli is the petitioner and the researcher working on Aadhaar. But first, I want to go to my colleague Anubhuti Vishnoi, who wrote the story. Anubhuti, would you explain the story to our viewers, please? What is it that the Election Commission is considering at this point?
So what we've reported today is that the Election Commission of India has taken a very clear call that it is best to make it mandatory to link the voter ID card with the Aadhaar number. To make it compulsory, they would have to move an amendment to the Representation of People Act, and that is what they intend to do. They will be making such a proposal to the Law Ministry very soon.
And we understand also that the Election Commission had attempted to do this once before, and then they've stopped in their voluntary enrollment because of the Supreme Court hearing that was on.
Absolutely, you're correct. So in 2015 is when the Election Commission of India started doing this. In March 2015, they started seeding some of the Aadhaar numbers with the voter ID cards. They covered about 380 million voters as well. But in August 2015, the Supreme Court put a break on this whole procedure because privacy concerns were raised around Aadhaar, and all kinds of Aadhaar linkages were then put on hold. That's when EC also had to put its own program on hold. Yet the Election Commission was keen to pursue ahead with this. In 2017, it filed a petition in the Supreme Court seeking to resume it. And that is why we see this situation now. Once the Supreme Court verdict has come, they want to go ahead with it.
Well, Anubhuti, here's the question. Does this effectively make Aadhaar mandatory? Because if we remember, the Supreme Court verdict told us quite clearly Aadhaar is needed for government welfare schemes and it should be used for government welfare schemes, but it cannot be used for anything outside of that. So, on one hand, yes, the Election Commission is going to have to, change the law or modify the law that our Indian representatives have. What about the Supreme Court verdict? How does that come into play?
So the Election Commission has taken this position in view of the Supreme Court verdict. After the verdict, they consulted the UIDAI, and the UID authority advised them that the best way to do it is to amend the law, because the verdict also says that any kind of Aadhaar linkage would now have to come when it's backed with the law, which is why they need to move an amendment to the Representation of People Act.
All right, that's fantastic. Anubhuti Vishwa, that exclusive story on the Economic Times this morning, that was then followed up by almost all of the other newspapers in the country. Please stay with us for as long as you can. I do know that you have another appointment immediately after this, but I want to open this up now to the rest of my panel to weigh in on. And I'll start with Mr. Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Mr. Vasudev, good evening, and thank you for joining us. My question to you is this. Fundamentally, the sort of dichotomy that always arises on this question is this: Aadhaar is not proof of citizenship; it's proof of residency, whereas voting is something that's linked to citizenship. So, if we then combine these two databases, will there be some sort of confusion about whether or not Aadhaar proves that I'm Indian?
Good evening. It's good to be back on the Aadhaar program. Long words,
it's good to have you back.
Wrong times. See, the Aadhaar linkage started for the thank you. The Aadhaar linkage started in different directions. The Supreme Court clamped it down by its judgment of September 2018. It said it can be only used for the purposes of subsidies and the like, which are mentioned in the Aadhaar Cat. If it is mentioned in the Aadhaar Act, you have to follow it. Now, see the dichotomy which is being created. The Supreme Court is the law of the land, is very specific, it can be used for specific purposes. It struck down the power of the government and the banks and telephone industry and the telephone companies, the whole gamut of them, that you cannot use the Aadhaar for this purpose because there was a right of privacy involved. Today, the Election Commission suggesting this, when it was asked to lay off in 2015 by an interim order of the court, is totally contrary to the mandate of the Representation of People Act, Section 21 and the like, as also the duties of the Election Commission under 324 of the Constitution. The Election Commission is set up under the Constitution. It is a body which is to carry out its functions under a statute, the RP Act, the Representation of People Act. It should not and cannot go contrary to the law laid down by the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court law is binding on it. A suggestion to bypass the Supreme Court by amending the RP Act would have its own problems. It will create a very difficult situation, because now the Election Commission, in exercise of its purported independence, would be standing up against the Supreme Court when its superintendence comes under the Supreme Court. It should not do it, because the effect of such a law or such a direction would be totally contrary to a whole host of acts, the Citizenship, the Passport Act, because holding the voter's ID card would entitle you to say that, look, I'm now a citizen of India. I can take advantage of this for all sorts of purposes. So this should not be permitted and should not happen. It is not in the larger interest of our nation. It is contrary to law. It is contrary to the position of the Election Commission, which is subservient to the Supreme Court. It is not above the Supreme Court.
Well, opening arguments by Kailash Vasudev, and I know that Shailesh Gandhi disagrees. Mr. Gandhi, your rebuttal, please.
I think we should consider the Supreme Court's judgment itself on Aadhaar. As far as I can figure out, it's a very confusing judgment. What is the opposition to Aadhaar? That it invades privacy, or it is not properly implemented and therefore it leads to a lot of hardship to people. Yes. If it is the Supreme Court judgment supposed to mean that it is okay for the poor to feel hardship, or for the poor to have, and the poor can have no privacy? I'm unable to see any legal or principled position based on this. Either if Aadhaar is very bad, let's not have Aadhaar at all. You can't say the poor need to have it because they want a scholarship, they want a subsidy, they want grains or maybe work. Therefore, I think the Supreme Court accepted the fact that Aadhaar is a reasonable identifier for people, which will not allow duplicates to be made, which will stop a lot of corruption. I think that was acknowledged. And that Aadhaar technically is not a completely flawed system. There may be mistakes in it. Even today, there are people with multiple ration cards, multiple election cards, and so on and so forth. People have multiple PAN cards also. I've heard of people having 100 PAN cards and opening shell companies, all of which cannot be changed unless we have a biometric identification. There may be problems and there will be problems in any system. That even today we don't have a problem. It's not that we don't have a problem to believe that, no, we have a problem-free society. Therefore, I would submit legally, constitutionally, I see no problem. Or the Supreme Court's judgment should not have been like this. It should have either said, no, you can't have Aadhaar, or it should have said, what are the reasons? If it's privacy, poor should also have their privacy. Then it will be going against Article 14 of the Constitution. And if it is lack of technical expertise or lack of technical propriety, then also the same should have hit the poor. With that judgment, I think the Supreme Court laid out its path, saying Aadhaar will come, and I think this is a very welcome move. It will stop a lot of malpractices in elections.
All right. So I do want to give Mr. Kailash Vasudev an opportunity to respond to that before I bring in the rest of the panel. Mr. Vasudev, go ahead, please.
See, the answer to Mr. Gandhi is this. Aadhaar is not a panacea for all government wrongs. We have had the problem of identification because of an inept system in our working of government. You've had duplicate PAN cards, as you just mentioned. You've had duplicate citizenship cards, which were issued at one point of time. You have duplicates or a horde of election identity cards. Those things are matters of governance. They were issued for good purposes of identification. The PAN was issued to enable you to have a tax return. The identity card was issued for the purposes of enabling you to come to vote at the voting poll. But it was not issued for malpractice. Unfortunately, it has gone into malpractice because when you delegate this work to private parties to collect data, you run into this problem. Under the Aadhaar system, you have a specific purpose. Under the election system, you have a specific purpose. Election rolls are to be revised every now and then. Physical enumeration takes place at your house. People from the department come check up how many members, who all are there, what is the name, and all those particulars are there. Notwithstanding that, we have a classic system of abusing it. It is here that governance must come in. It is not Aadhaar. It is the electoral system which has to be looked at. It is here that the regulation has come. I'm sorry to raise it, but just look what's happened. In every election, you have violence.
Yes.
When you have violence, you also have a system of identifying the booth where the violence has taken place. When do you stop it? You have your voters' ID cards there. You have the number of people who are there. You have got the whole thing on CCTVs. Why can't you take action then? So it is the same situation with your election voters card. The voters card has got to be kept sacrosanct, and it is for the Election Commission under the RP Act to make sure there is no malpractice in this. Otherwise, the whole system is gone.
Let me bring in the members of the political parties as well,
to the other, but it doesn't take you any place.
Doesn't take you anywhere. Mohammed Khan of the Congress. Mohammed Khan, going by
yes, they have
the
to
recent...
be brought in. They have to be reined in.
Yes, going by the
Hi,
Congress
Faye.
president's, good evening, reactions to the electoral process in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. Obviously, the Congress is currently very keen that all electoral process be as watertight as possible. So would you support a move to link Aadhaar to voter IDs?
Yes. You would be surprised, Faye, with regard to my answer. The idea is not essentially a bad one. Because, and I say this because of our experiences in Telangana. In Telangana, we actually found, Faye, out of 2 crore 72 lakh voters, we found duplicates of close to 30 lakhs. Now imagine what kind of a sizable percentage that is. We saw people, because of the bifurcation of the state, who had voter IDs for both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. It was uncanny, and we took all of this data. It wasn't a matter of opinion, it was a matter of fact, and we put it before the Supreme Court. There were 3 petitions before the Supreme Court, one with regard to the voter list of Madhya Pradesh, one with regard to Rajasthan, and one with regard to Telangana. Telangana was the only one that the Supreme Court exercised jurisdiction over and said that the High Court must look into this matter immediately. So that matter is still going on. But imagine if Aadhaar cards had been linked to those voter IDs. There would not have been duplication. This also brings me to our stated position in Parliament. While we are against the extension of Aadhaar without any rationale or justification to every and any scheme, we do feel there are certain areas in which Aadhaar can play a vital role, provided that mechanisms and safeguards, like Vasudev Sahab said, are put in place. I'll tell you something, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, he is the main person from our party who's been speaking on the issue. In Parliament last year, he moved 11 amendments, or I'm sorry, I think it was 9 amendments. These amendments related to 3 things. One, you and I can opt out of Aadhaar for any non-essential service. Number 2, Aadhaar will be confined only to essential government schemes. And number 3, data privacy must rest with me, as in the data, you and I must have sovereignty over our data. It shouldn't be owned by the government. So, अगर कल चोरी हो जाती है, data के साथ कोई छेड़छाड़ होती है, तो you and I can actually take action against the government. So, this is in sync with our larger position. So then, it's a good idea.
So it's a good idea. Okay, so then, Mohammed Khan, answer this. Wouldn't this effectively make Aadhaar compulsory? If you're telling me that I should retain the ability to opt out, what do I then opt out of the voting process, which is both my right and duty as a citizen? If you're telling me that the data will remain private, how will the data remain private? Because now you have data, you know, that gives you far more information and it's electronic. So all of the arguments that the Congress party made about Aadhaar during the Supreme Court case, this particular decision goes against all of those arguments.
Correct.
No, those are all valid. No, actually, Faye, those are all still valid arguments. We still believe that the infrastructure is shaky. We still believe that the arguments that the data is protected by 20-inch thick walls, etc., is absurd. We still believe that you could not have brought it as a money bill. We still believe that you were overzealous and your objective was not service delivery, but rather surveillance. But we also said linking it to voter IDs and linking it to income tax returns is something we would be okay with. Again, this has to go through enormous rounds of debate, Faye. Enormous rounds of debate, because it's a far-reaching exercise, as Kailash Saab said. Therefore, we should not rush to it, and it must also be in sync with the judgment of the Supreme Court. All original arguments stand, but to say that this idea is a bad idea off the bat would be intellectually disingenuous of us.
Well, you know, we've also heard, there were also reports about the fact that a certain percentage of the Aadhaar data is faulty in one way or the other. Would that then lock about 10% of the Indian population out of the voting, or out of their right to vote? That's my one question. My second question, Mohammed Khan, is this, out of curiosity, because you've joined us this evening, who's going to be the Chief Minister of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh?
Madhya Pradesh ka to ho gaya na elan. I mean, in a way, in a manner of speaking. Of course, it is not my place to say right now, because in the next half an hour, you will hear a prominent announcement. Mr. Kamal Nath and Jyotiraditya ji have flown back to the state. It is their moment.
Yes.
It is their
So basically, Congress is dragging this out in order to keep the headlines in prime time. But let's quickly move on. Bhaskar Ghosh, spokesperson of the BJP.
Rajasthan, you'll know in an hour and a half.
Bhaskar Ghosh, spokesperson of the BJP, what is the BJP stand on making Aadhaar mandatory and linking it to voter IDs? Aren't you effectively then going against the Supreme Court verdict? Wouldn't you be in contempt of court?
Correct. Correct.
I believe my Congress panelist, Mr. Mohammed Khan, his statement, or his just now information about this the CM of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh is as confusing as his statement regarding linking Aadhaar card with the voter ID. See, he knows, but he has perhaps not mentioned that this country of 155 crore populations, almost 122 crores population have been issued the Aadhaar card. There are 5 crore unidentified immigrants are still dwelling in this country, and if you see the deadly position of Jammu Kashmir and the border area of Assam, West Bengal, there this Aadhaar card have been issued initially to those persons who will not be covered now if the new citizenship bill comes into the act. Number 2, this linking the Aadhaar card with the voter ID is basically to identify the bogus.
Are you just, Mr. Ghosh, did you just tell me that Aadhaar cards have been handed over to refugees that have crossed the border into Bengal from Bangladesh? So you're effectively telling me that Rohingyas have Aadhaar cards?
Yeah.
Is that what you just said?
More than, yes, I'm just, exactly.
And this from a government representative who fought tooth and nail to make Aadhaar compulsory on everything?
Immigrants. No. Question is that now, that is the way the government is going for the biometric Aadhaar card. right? Misuse of Aadhaar card has such an extent that if you do not link this Aadhaar card with the voter ID with the biometric option, right? My friend from Congress, they knows how much of bogus voters and
But you just
chappa
told me
vote
the
has been,
Aadhaar system is bogus,
given in
Mr.
the last
Ghosh.
elections. No.
No. So, okay, let's break this down and go over it
No,
one
no,
more
no,
time.
not Aadhaar system is bogus. What I'm talking about.
You just said that Rohingyas have been given
system
Aadhaar cards.
Linking, I'm
You
sorry
said Rohingyas have been given Aadhaar cards. People who are not Indian have been given Aadhaar cards.
What I mean to say, now we are seeing now voter IDs. I'm talking voter IDs. I'm sorry, I'm talking voter IDs. Now these voter IDs have been issued to Rohingyas and others. Now if you link this voter ID with the Aadhaar card, then the milk and water will be separate. Now this voter ID have been issued by the state government. And this voter ID was rampantly used in order to create those false votings. Oh. Now, that is why my friend from Congress is perhaps apprehending the moment Aadhaar card will be linked with the voter IDs, with the biometric option, then everything will be on the surface.
Mr. Ghosh, let me spell out to you why you have just argued against your own government, if I may. You said voter IDs have been given to Rohingyas and other refugees who are not Indian citizens. Do you realize the voter ID can be used as identification to get an Aadhaar card? So everyone who has been given a voter ID can use that voter ID along with their iris and their fingerprints to get an Aadhaar card. You don't need anything else. So effectively, you've just argued that Rohingyas and refugees who are not Indian citizens have Aadhaar numbers, and that is fine because Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship, but now you want to make it a proof of citizenship. So I'm not really sure what you're arguing. Could you please tell me in a yes or no answer, do you think this link between Aadhaar and voter ID should happen?
Yes, of course it should happen. Of course. If it is a one nation, one Nissan and one Pradhan, like one UID should be there in this country. One UID should be there in this country in order to identify the genuine citizen of this country. And Aadhaar is the only means where you have got this biometric
Okay,
this voter ID.
I'm a little worried that if you introduce a one, if you want to bring in a one identification, you will do it like you brought in a one tax under GST, which was actually 5 taxes. But let me take this back again, just if I may, to Kailash Vasudev, Mr. Vasudev.
Not at all.
This is very confusing.
Today, Jammu Kashmir, if
we go to Jammu Kashmir, we'll find snow and very friendly people who will invite tourists. We are not having that conversation. Mr. Kailash Vasudev, here's the problem. Aadhaar is not meant to be a citizenship document.
As a matter of fact, if you read the entire Supreme Court judgment, which I had to revise this evening, it deals with these issues. And it expresses a certain amount of caution in the matter of surveillance states. It also expresses a certain amount of caution, and it even, if I may say so, at one stage, it also deals with the election process and with regard to voting, that in the period for retention of data. See, the Supreme Court judgment is a judgment which has considered a lot of aspects. Yes, Mr. Gandhi is right, there is some bit of ambulatory observations in certain places. But by and large, it tells you it is dealing with the Aadhaar system under the Aadhaar Act. And if it is taking a view on the Aadhaar Act, it is taking it on two principles. One, the function of the Aadhaar Act. The second is the right of the citizen under the Constitution. It is trying to strike a balance. It tells you Aadhaar Act, yes, for certain purposes, not for many purposes. Today, the Election Commission says, no, we will extend the Supreme Court observation with regard to Aadhaar for some purposes by bringing in the electoral process. You cannot do it because the Supreme Court is very clear on this matter. If someone reads the whole judgment, he will realize the scheme of it. The Supreme Court judgment is a scheme. It's a suggestion to government. It's a judgment. It's a law by the court. After considering all arguments from all parties. Yes, as I said, Mr. Gandhi is right. There are certain ambulatory positions in it because in every judgment there is an obiter. Every judgment there's a concise position of the law. And that is what we are dealing with. There is no way that the court suggests that you can link this for any other purposes excepting Aadhaar. PAN was approved by the court because of an earlier judgment which came a few months before this judgment. And that came because of an amendment to Section 139 of the Income Tax Act. So the positions are different. We cannot possibly equate it with this. Mr. Ghosh is trying to say that Aadhaar should be made mandatory for the purposes of elections. Why can't the Election Commission then root out the bogus cards? That was the purpose of the electoral system. You introduced the electoral card for this, to root out people who are there. But you failed in doing it. If you fail in doing it, please don't take recourse to systems which don't come with the domain of elections.
Right. I also have joining us on the show right now, Srinivas. Yes. I beg your pardon. Go on, Mr. Vasudev. Forgive me. Go on, please.
No, I was saying something else. You see, what I was saying is that you have systems. You are within the Election Commission. It's an institution which is respected worldwide. And now we see that it has come to a situation where it is failing us again. I'm sad to say this because the Election Commission is an institution of tremendous respect for us. It gives us a freedom, it gives us a democracy, it gives us the right and the freedom to think that we're independent, to go and vote in correct principles. But doing this, we will suddenly start thinking, why is this happening? Don't cause a situation or a flutter by doing something which is outside your domain. It is not in your ken.
Well, I have one more guest on the panel. Srinivas.
Maintain the democracy.
Yes,
maintain
Srinivas joins us right now.
Maintain the franchise.
Srinivas is an independent researcher working on Aadhaar, and he's also been a petitioner on the case. Srinivas, thank you for joining us. Would you tell us, in your understanding, if there are challenges that you foresee in linking the Aadhaar card, the Aadhaar number with the voter ID?
I'll tell you what are the challenges which the Election Commission itself faced when they had the NERP AP program in 2015. The Election Commission has acquired Aadhaar data from the state governments without the consent of the voters. If they're saying they're going to make Aadhaar mandatory, will they go collect the Aadhaar card from the voter directory, or will just acquire it from the government because the government has all of this Aadhaar data? In fact, the Election Commission has done it, and the Election Commission has written to the UIDA in the past saying that you need to make voter ID mandatory to get an Aadhaar. Okay. So there are several issues of citizenship, there are issues of privacy, and there are issues of voter profiling. Faye, we are hearing reports across the country where both the national parties want to use Aadhaar to profile citizens. In fact, we have reports that say that it was done in the Rajasthan elections. So I'll tell you frankly what has happened in Telangana. In Telangana, there was a huge survey post the bifurcation of AP and Andhra Pradesh, where both the governments have collected all the data about citizens. They did state census where they collected voter ID, Aadhaar, bank account numbers, phone numbers, everything about a voter. And now, this whole issue of duplicate voters in Telangana, are they actually duplicate and dead? If they were, then they were protesting on the election day. If you look at the amount of protests that happened across Telangana of voters who couldn't exercise their franchise, you know the anger that is being seen in Telangana. And all of this was done because the Election Commission has illegally linked Aadhaar with voter ID and experimented. The first experiment and the pilot that was done with voter ID and Aadhaar linking has happened in Hyderabad with GHMC, UIDA and Election Commission of India. And I don't understand this. All of this was done without amending the Representation of People's Act. It was illegal in the first place itself. Now the Election Commission is trying to bypass the Supreme Court order to do the same thing again. So I filed a public interest litigation in Hyderabad High Court on this matter.
Yes.
We're asking the Election Commission to delete all the Aadhaar data it has illegally acquired. We're asking the Election Commission to go to the government and delete all the voter ID data that the government has illegally acquired. And we are in fact asking the election procedure to be made transparent because we don't know how they are using a software to deduplicate voter. Okay, if you look at Delhi, let me bring it Delhi. In Delhi, AAP has complained that the Election Commission has deleted 30 lakh voters suo moto. That these deletions is where an electoral roll officer deletes a voter because he's convinced that it's a duplicate voter. But how is he convinced that it's a duplicate voter without a field verification? He has taken a suo moto decision. You can look at Delhi Chief Electoral Officer's website. You'll find the list of people who have been deleted suo moto in 2015 again. The Election Commission has experimented on people's rights. I understand the Election Commission does experiments in each individual constituencies, say before you want to install newer VVPATs, but you don't do it across the country at scale, and that is what they have done. The Election Commission has lost the trust of the Telangana people who have been complaining about their franchise on the election day. All of this is illegal, and I don't understand why all the national parties want to support this when all of them question the integrity of Aadhaar itself when they were in opposition.
Well, that's a very good point. Several very good points, Srinivas. I just want to remind you, the Congress party is still effectively in opposition. They've just won 3 states, so they have, that hasn't changed. But just so I understand what you're saying, you said that the Election Commission is experimenting on people's rights, that this entire move is illegal. And I just want to bring to your notice that there was a report, I remember clearly, from an RTI letter that was sent in, that the Aadhaar, the UIDAI has itself not cross-verified all its Aadhaar numbers. So the UIDAI, for example, has handed out 98% of Aadhaar numbers, but they haven't verified that Shailesh Gandhi number 1 and this Aadhaar is actually just the same person, and they haven't given you 2, or there aren't 2 cards linked to you. That cross-verification to make sure one person, one number has not been done in that database. It's not something they've gotten around to doing. So the argument that we're making, that one person would have multiple voter IDs, or they might be duplicate IDs, or they might be errors in the IDs, that hygiene process has not been done in the Aadhaar system for us to say confidently that there is no problem with it.
If that is the case, it's a major scam, and everybody linked to Aadhaar, including the earlier Prime Minister and Mr. Nilekani, should be put inside prison and locked up.
But I don't know about prison, but I agree that everybody should be held accountable.
Let me explain.
Yes.
The Aadhaar card, when you are registering for an Aadhaar card or where you are verifying your identity, they check with your fingerprints, iris scan, whatever it is.
Yes.
When a new number is given, that is checked. My submission is
when the number is given to you.
When the number is given, so therefore, if I go again, that number cannot be given to me, because if I go a second time, the system will recognize that this person has been there, whether in the name of Shailesh Gandhi, A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
You already voted.
But do we know if the system is making errors? The answer is no.
I am told the system is fairly foolproof, and let me just give you a few arguments on this. A, commercial businesses are very sharp. The telecom business went in for Aadhaar verification, and if there were major problems, they would have howled murder. Because it's a commercial organization, they cannot have a lot of problems in giving of telephones. 2, even in banks, there has not been a major, and again, I'm not saying there will be 0 problems, but 2 things I would like to understand.
Yes.
The Supreme Court judgment is hailed as a great judgment. Please tell me, has it suspended Article 14 for the poor? Because what's the objection to Aadhaar? The objection to Aadhaar is basically either loss of privacy or lack of, what would you call it, consistency.
Yes.
And that it's a big fraud.
Yes.
In either case, should 70% of this population suffer?
Be subject to that, yes. Okay, so fair enough. But to be,
so
you're arguing. Yes, you're arguing with the Supreme Court verdict.
I would like someone to justify and say how Article 14 is being safeguarded by the Supreme Court in this judgment.
But technically, the only people who can actually offer you that explanation are the majority, the judges who gave the majority verdict on that Supreme Court verdict. But
all of us can logically
Kailash
think.
Vasudev, do you want to answer that
Mr.
question?
Vasudev will be able to educate
Mr. Vasudev.
As to how Article 14 has not been overthrown by this, saying, no, the poor must have it, those who win, and the rich don't.
Okay. Mr. Vasudev, please.
The answer is simple. The Supreme Court is interpreting the provisions of the Aadhaar Act. To support their view that the Aadhaar Act was good in certain sections, bad in the others, they tested it on the anvil of Article 14. The test was done, certain portions of the Act were also struck down. Some portions were read down. So Article 14 is a constitutional pivot on which your rights are decided. On that constitutional pivot, they have decided the matter in the Justice Pottuswamy's case. But to turn around and say the Supreme Court hasn't considered Article 14, I think would be a bit difficult to say.
So the poor have different rights and the rich have different rights?
And once it looks into it, it also says. You see, different rights because the Aadhaar is meant for different people. It's not meant for everybody.
So I do believe
it is meant for people
Mr.
who take
Kailash
subsidies and
Vasudev is
assistance
saying
from
is that
government.
the basic...
It is not meant for you.
Yes, forgive me, Mr. Vasudev. The basic interpretation of the Aadhaar was meant to deliver subsidy to people who needed or wanted subsidy.
No, that was not. It was meant as an identity. That's the name.
No,
Unique identity.
it was meant as a verification. It was never meant as an identity.
No.
In fact, if you read the first presentation of Nandan Nilekani...
No, if you read the Act...
It was being used...
The Act may have been drafted badly. I'm not disputing that. I'm not getting into the Act.
Kailash, it was being used for identity.
But it was meant as verification. And the Act, whether drafted badly or well, the Supreme Court can only refer to the Act and not to the presentation made by Nandan Nilekani.
No, but the basic structure of the Constitution that Article 14 must survive is something that
I understand your problem, but unfortunately that's not what we're debating right now, and that's taking us a little off course. We have a couple of people on the phone line. Jacob is on the phone line from Mangalore. Jacob, go ahead, please.
Good evening to all.
Good evening.
Yeah, my main problem is the government department, no government department works sincerely.
Yes.
Secondly, they give all the work to outsourcing.
Yes.
There is no check and balances.
Okay.
Now, my real worry is linking the Aadhaar to the voter ID. How will solve the missing names problem?
Yes. How will you solve? Yes.
Now so many missing names. How it will whether solve the problem of missing names?
Yes. Fair enough, Jacob. Pradeep on the phone line from Chennai. Pradeep, go ahead.
Yes. Good evening.
Yes.
My view, linking of Aadhaar and with voter ID is welcome move, provided the database, the data of both the voter's ID and the Aadhaar is verified at the ground level. What I want is, I don't want my vote to be casted by somebody else. That's the last thing I want. Missing names, yes, that's also there. End of the day, I don't want these illegal things to happen.
So, yes, Monica on the phone line from Chandigarh. Monica, go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Can I tell you my views?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I want to say that the system is not foolproof. I have had people whose Aadhaars have showed up at my house and they don't live in my house.
Okay.
They have managed to somehow verify this address as their home address. And it has happened to multiple people I know. So people living outside the state can end up getting an Aadhaar of my house or my state and you will never know.
So you're saying with that link, then voter IDs will also be...
Yeah, you can manipulate, and I don't think an Aadhaar is helping crack down on the 22 lakh voters which were missing in Telangana. So I don't know how Aadhaar is going to help that.
So fair enough. And if we go back to the first question that our viewer asked us, and I want Srinivas to answer this question. Already we have a lot of people who get left off voter lists. If we do the Aadhaar linking, what you're going to do is effectively eliminate more voters. And the verification process, is it properly verified on the ground? Srinivas, so the business of Aadhaar within the UIDAI, has the database been cross-verified? Do we know that there is only one Kailash Vasudev with his fingerprint and iris scan in the database, and he doesn't have more than one number, or there isn't more than one there isn't more than one Kailash Vasudev? Go ahead, Srinivas, go ahead.
You had enough reports which say that Aadhaars were issued duplicately for different people. There was an Aadhaar for Hanuman. There was an Aadhaar for promising the dog. There have been enough issues. But I want to bring to the main issue of the Election Commission and the missing voters. Yeah, the Election Commission's motto, Faye, is let no voter be left behind. What they are doing now, they are going after is, we will delete voters whom we think are duplicate. And we are going to use technology to do that. But Faye, is this technology that they are using is transparent? Has it proven that it works? We know for a fact that in Telangana it didn't work, and the Election Commission's own documents show that in Bihar, the software has has predicted that there are 37 lakh duplicate voters. A field verification revealed that only 2 lakhs of them are actually duplicates, and 35 lakhs of them are actually genuine voters. There's a document with the Election Commission which says this. My entire case is based on this, that this entire process is non-transparent and you can't give governance to an algorithm and a software. Okay, instead of including voters in the voter list, you're deleting them. And this way is a shift in Election Commission's direction of letting voters vote in election versus removing them off the list. And again, it's important to investigate what has happened in Telangana and Delhi, and you will find that which is because of software which was not working.
Fair enough. A question to, I know that Kailash Vasudev wants to respond. Quite frankly, Mr. Vasudev, if there is more than one of you, we could use as many as there are. But go ahead. Why do you believe that the Election Commission should not be eliminating names from the list?
I will tell you the reason. If you look at the Representation of People's Act and the method of preparing an electoral roll, it is meant on a certain principle and a certain factual basis. The Election Commission delegates this work to its subordinates and to state authorities. So when you enumerate details and get details from a house-to-house election, which is supposed to do for drawing up the electoral rolls, because each constituency has sub-constituency, it has wards and everything. So when the people come from the Election Commission, they're obliged to give information of all sorts. Let me tell you what happened to us in our little colony in Delhi. When the enumerators came, a lot of our staff went and enrolled themselves with the Election Commission officers, saying that, look, we also stay in this house. In the bargain, they were given election cards. It took our welfare association and some of us quite some time to tell the Election Commission, look, these people also stay in their own states, they have their own cards over there. It was then that a revision took place and a lot of names were eliminated. But what is happening is that we are not able to get the Election Commission to understand that there's a migratory worker group. There is a migratory group of people who work all over the place. There are a migratory group of people who work in one state, who are residents of one state. Now, for example, you will find that in Bangalore, you have a lot of IT personnel.
Won't Aadhaar solve that problem?
Bangalore, but they stay there. So therefore, no, it won't. Okay. It cannot.
Why not?
Because if your basic enumeration for the purpose of inclusion in the electoral roll is not correct, you will never have the corrected information based on Aadhaar. Aadhaar is only an identification process to an extent, as the court says. It is not a system of enrolling you as a voter. The enrollment of a voter, the removal of a voter, the revision of electoral rolls is a totally different process. You have got to do it on a factual, correct basis by examining each place.
Yes.
Even in the JJ colonies in the clusters, they've gone there for the purposes of identifying them, but they don't ask, do you have any permanent residence in some other state? So therefore, there's no correlation there.
Sure.
I'm a Delhi resident. You are a Bangalore resident working in Bombay. Supposing you give your addresses in both places, what happens? You're entitled to. But then someone has to eliminate one. You cannot vote in two states. So therefore, you've got to work a system for the purpose of which it is devised. By taking divisive systems, by taking consideration of other things for purposes of ID, you're not going to find one suggestion, all right. At this point of time, we're contemplating that there's a lot of duplication, there is an incorrect electoral roll, etc.
Yes,
right? But scrap all your electoral cards as they stand today. Start de novo after the elections.
Well,
and when you do the de novo selections, please make sure that your enumerators do a good job. But after the elections. If you do it now,
let me ask this question of Mohammad Khan. Mohammad Khan, during the entire debate, you've been on this channel arguing for the Congress party. Mr. Kailash Vasudev was here as well. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi was here as well. Your argument was constantly the fact that the Aadhaar database is not foolproof, that there are several errors that have taken place, that there have been errors in the input, and hence the entire database is compromised because the input was compromised, and it should not be, and hence it should not be made mandatory.
Absolutely.
How have you suddenly changed your mind about that? What will effectively do is lock a bunch of people out of the voter system.
So, Faye, your question to me, I thought, was part of a larger, academic inquiry as to what we would think on the subject. And I'm sorry if I was less than clear. Our position is, and I went to pains to explain it, we agree with Vasudev Saab. Our position hasn't changed. But this is an idea based on certain experiences that we could look into. My point was that at this point, it still requires numerous checks and balances, and I repeated that all the arguments we made then are as valid today. I agree with everything you and Vasudev Saab are saying. That is the Congress position. We have taken it in court. We've argued it in black and white. So therefore, we are not going to turn away from it. But because today's debate topic focused on this area, should we link it to voter IDs? I was arguing an alternative proposition that yes, in theory, it might be a good idea, depending on various other mechanisms working out. So therefore, Srinivas Sab, again, please don't confuse what we're trying to say. And I'm sorry again if I was less than clear, because Srinivas Sab, we are against this government's draconian version of Aadhaar. We've said so in Parliament, we've said so in court, we've said so in press conferences, we've said so on television debates. That hasn't changed. I know Srinivas Sab works with Usha ma'am also. So I want to be very clear, particularly because of that reason, that we are not changing our position. Faye asked me a question as to whether this particular idea is good. So, we felt, okay, let's see. So that's our position. Ultimately, right now, Aadhaar is not in the shape it should ultimately be.
Mr. Gandhi?
I think today I'm seeing the Congress hopeful that it might form the next central government.
Okay.
In between, they started Aadhaar and more than 50-60% of the Aadhaar cards were issued in their time. But when they went in, of course, when the current government was in opposition, it said, no way we'll have Aadhaar. Then these people probably thought they'll never get into the government. So they said, we oppose Aadhaar. Now they think they have hope, so they are somewhere in between. And maybe in a little while, they will, if they feel more confident, they will say, yes, Aadhaar is a good concept. And bad governance cannot be linked to this.
Well, we've always...
Citizenship is not linked to Aadhaar.
Yes.
Citizenship has to be determined in a separate manner, except citizenship
would say,
these other numbers are Indian citizens.
Shailesh Saab.
Declaration of Indian citizenship is not linked to
Shailesh
Aadhaar.
Okay.
But
again,
Aadhaar identifies that person.
We did
Mr.
a whole
Basdev
press
said
conference on the distinctions between the Congress Aadhaar and the BJP Aadhaar
numbers.
That's the whole completely different, Gandhi Saab. They're completely different.
No, but I'm very curious to know from the two political parties if the deal was that you could only do this after the next Lok Sabha elections, because there's not enough time now. After the next Lok Sabha elections, first cross-verify the entire Aadhaar database. So, actually clean up the bugs in the system. Now that the Supreme Court has said we're stuck with Aadhaar, let's actually fix it. Then go clean up the electoral database, then match the two nicely when it's both cleaned up. Would you still be in support of it, or is everybody jumping on this bandwagon right now because, like Srinivas told us, you will have gorgeous databases that you can use then for your election campaign? Srinivas, I want to understand from you why you believe the political parties have access to the database, or will find that the linking allows them in some way access to data before the next elections.
Because there are statements being made by Mr. Shah, which are being in the media, that he wants data of all the beneficiaries and he wants to target all the beneficiaries. That's his main strategy for the 2019 elections. What is this beneficiary data Mr. Shah is referring to? It's all Aadhaar data. And in fact, in Telangana, where I come from, where I've shown all the data leaks have been happening in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, it was exactly this data which was collected from the voters through state census surveys which were illegal. And also, Faye, I want to quote Mr. Motilal Nehru here. Any restriction on the right to vote is a restriction on democracy itself.
Yes.
And Aadhaar is that restriction.
Yes, yes. In fact, in the run-up to the elections, we will also do shows about whether or not, if you find your name off the list, should you go to the police station and file a complaint, because that is an infringement on your rights. But we've run out of time. Mohammad Khan, let me point out to you that no eminent, pertinent announcement has come from the Congress headquarters. But I want you to commit today on television that there will be no scuffles or violence or any sort of bad behavior by any Congress supporters in the 3 states that you are now responsible for.
Yes, absolutely, Faye. That is a commitment that I would be more than happy to give. In fact, I remember earlier today, the leaders whose supporters were allegedly rioting on that highway came out and told them stop, and they told them in the most stern terms. Today morning, when Sachin Pilot's supporters showed up at a part of central Delhi and were protesting, he came out and he told them absolutely to stop. So we've sent a very strong message. And on a lighter note, I remember you were doing a debate and we were at on the election day, and you chastised us for the firecrackers.
Yes.
And we immediately made them stop. So you have held us accountable and we have responded. So I can assure you that
okay, so just out of curiosity, as a journalist, the first point is, if you do want to make headlines, you should have done it at prime time, and you're running out of prime time very quickly. Second, aren't you just dragging this out? Shouldn't Congress High Command have made this decision long ago and known what it wanted? What is this business of being so indecisive?
Well, in the words of Rahulji, who was quoting Leo Tolstoy today, time and patience are the two strongest warriors. We are not doing this to grab headlines. This is part of a larger process. We have consulted with a very vast spectrum of stakeholders, everyone from CLP leaders to local workers to the people themselves. And then we are arriving at a decision which we feel will be in everyone's best interest. So,
well, in response to
night, so
Rahul Gandhi, who quoted Tolstoy today, patience is apparently one thing that Congress workers on the ground are the ones who lack the most, because they're blocking highways in the 3 states that you've taken responsibility for. And if you keep telling me to hold you accountable, it's very difficult for me to do that. If you don't pick a chief minister and put the person in charge so we can start working. Who am I to hold accountable? All right, but I have been told we've run out of time and we have to wrap this up. But this is what, what we saw today. That's hugely disappointing. I mean, at the end of the day, Congress supporters protesting against the Congress. What can be more disappointing? But coming back to the Aadhaar conversation, we have a couple of things to consider now. We're 3 months away from a very important, very big election. All that I can say to you is this. We have to vote like our country depends on it. Because it does. We have to vote like our democracy depends on it, because it does. To be able to vote is both your right and your duty. Go to the website of the Election Commission today. Check if your name is on the list. If your name is not on the list, then we will actually start putting out information on how you can include your name on the list. If your name is on the list in a different city, we will start putting out information on how you can get your name transferred. It is extremely important over the next 3 months, before March, in fact, in the next 2 months, that you and I and everybody else in this country make sure that we are registered. And you know why we're having this conversation on the urban debate? Because urban citizens have the worst track record when it comes to voting. It's the people in the villages who travel many, many kilometers to make sure that they vote, but we don't. We complain and say, I'm registered in Bangalore, I happen to live in Mumbai, I can't vote now. Let's fix that problem. In the meantime, we will bring you all of the information you need. Whether or not the Election Commission considers this a good idea, they will have to modify a law in order to bring this into force. I don't know how much time they have to do that, but we will continue to have conversations because this is a hugely important topic. Get in touch with us, get in touch with me if you have any questions about your right to vote and about your voter ID, and we will try and make sure that we answer all of your questions. My personal email ID is faye.d'souza@timesgroup.com. If you have a problem with your voter ID, you have a question about your voter ID, get in touch with us and we will try and we'll fix that problem. We want 1 billion votes this year, and we want all the young people in this country to go out and vote. Thanks for watching.